I got a phone call from a family member in the middle of the night. I was sleeping, so I didn't answer it, but then I got several more, and I realized, I think subconsciously, that I needed to wake up and check out what was going on. So the person over the phone told me, Adam, it's time to come home. When I speak up about something that I really care about, the more that I receive chances to share the meaning of music making, what it means to be an artist, what it means to be a Black, queer, neurodivergent person in the arts, and how honoring humanity is, to me, the ultimate purpose of art in general. Chanting provided me this opportunity to learn how to tap into myself, to open up my life, open up my awareness to something greater than myself, and to really harness my own abilities to change my life.
From SGI USA, I'm Cassidy Bradford, and this is Buddhability, the weekly series where I talk with Buddhists from all walks of life about the power we each have to change our lives and the world around us. Hi, Cassidy from Buddhability here. If you're enjoying the show, don't forget to subscribe. It'll help the show out, and you'll never miss an episode. If you want more Buddhability content, you can subscribe to our email newsletter in the link below. We put out great content every week. Enjoy the show. Welcome to Buddhability, Adam. Thank you so much for coming. And it's exciting to have you in person. For folks that don't know you, you are from Texas and you're in New York right now for a show. So we're doing in person. But yeah, I always have guests just introduce themselves. So tell me about like your life, who you are, and a little bit about your life growing up too, to kind of provide context.
A little context. Absolutely. Yeah. So thank you for having me. It's fun to do this in person. Yeah, I came fresh off of a concert last night, so I'm riding that musical wave and just kind of coming back down to earth now. So yeah, my full name is Adam W. Sadberry. I'm 29 years old. I live in Montgomery, Texas, which is just about an hour north of Houston. Okay. It's this kind of suburban / ex-urban town where like there's a lake that I can walk to and trees everywhere, but also like if I drive 10 miles down the road, it's just cows and horses. So it's a nice eclectic place. Let's see. Yeah, I'm an only child, and I grew up with my two wonderful parents. They decided to raise me in Montgomery because that's like halfway between where they were working at the time. So my dad was driving all the way to Houston, which is maybe a 3-hour round trip. And my mom was driving to College Station, which was maybe a 2-hour round trip for her. So grew up in a family where there's a lot of effort put into getting the job done. So I kind of inherited that workaholism, you could say. Yeah, I'm at the end of like a little 2-week tour right now of things, and sleep is a great concept. I'm going to claim it in reality pretty soon.
Yeah, it's coming.
Exactly. And yeah, I am primarily a musician. I play the flute professionally. I'm also an educator, and my life revolves around this idea of cultural storytelling, basically. But a lot of what I do is advocating for my late grandfather's legacy. His name is L. Alex Wilson. He was a journalist during the Civil Rights Movement. Because of him, we know about stories of people like Emmett Till, and we know about Little Rock 9 and Montgomery bus boycott because of him. So there are a lot of things I'm up to, and there are also like the interpersonal things and finding more friends and community. So I think that's enough to get started with.
Oh, totally. I was like, oh my gosh, there's all these little threads that we need to pull. But I think maybe we can start with, like, you know, of course you said you're a musician, and in your family, and now also hearing about your grandfather, his legacy as well. I understand that, like, growing up, you put a lot of your self-worth into music. And so I'm wondering if, like, we can talk about maybe your time before you started practicing Buddhism. Like, because I mean, I imagine having a grandfather that's like, wow, you have this incredible legacy. I personally would feel like, oh God, like that's a lot of pressure. I don't know if that's your experience, but
I've certainly felt that.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's see. So growing up, my grandfather, he passed in 1960, so he was way before my time, so he was always this elusive figure. My grandmother was this incredibly powerful woman who also was a journalist in the Civil Rights Movement, and she lived in Memphis when I was growing up, like up until I was 14, but then she moved closer to my family and made our family unit much larger. And then my dad's mom moved from Houston to my actual home when I was also about 13. So it was me as an only child, my parents, and then 2 grandmothers in proximity. So there's a lot of maternal energy. My dad's mom had Alzheimer's, though, so there was this element of caregiving that was implanted early on in my upbringing. And my mom's mom moved closer because she was also getting older and wanted to be closer to her only child, my mom. And so like there's that mix, and then there's the mix of my parents still doing as much as they could for their careers up until I was maybe for my mom until I was maybe 8 or 9, and my dad until I graduated from high school. So there's a lot of effort being put into family life, but not necessarily a lot of like fun and excitement. So I look back and I think, man, we worked way too hard, and we should have just eaten more like yams and potatoes and talked about whatever movies and gone to see things, which is its own, karmic thing. But that allowed me to learn how to really invest in myself as a flute player. So I practiced all the time. All the time. It was so fun because I had a lot of music running in my blood, still do have a lot of music running in my blood. Music educators on my dad's side of the family, including an aunt who ended up teaching Beyonce and Solange whenever they were in like preschool.
Oh my gosh.
It's kind of cool. Right?
Oh my God.
And then like beautiful voices on my mom's side of the family. So yeah, I picked up the flute thinking, okay, I've heard a lot of music. My dad played a lot of jazz flute albums growing up. I think I can do this. So I just ran into it and had a lot of fun, found community through that. And the career that was slowly blooming through that validated parts of myself that I didn't know how to validate. Yeah. So skipping way down the line, I was principal flutist of the Memphis Symphony Orchestra, and I realized that I had built a life that was entirely based on validating myself through my resume, not through my value as a person. Yeah. And I realized it was time to quit. So I did.
Wow. Were you like introduced to Buddhism at that time?
Right at this point, basically.
Wow.
So
tell me that story then.
Right. So after I quit, I started seeking. I grew up in the Episcopal Church, which is it was a very good environment. I had wonderful community there, but I realized that I wanted something a little different. So I visited a couple churches. I had a good time, but then I went on Facebook one day, and a friend of mine who lives here in New York, he posted about going to this conference specifically for people of African descent. And I saw the photos. I know him to be a very serious guy in some occasions, but at this moment I saw how delighted he was, and I thought, I want some of that. Yeah. And so I mystically ended up getting a job in the same place that he lived. So I immediately had this opportunity to move from Memphis to St. Paul, Minnesota, and then he introduced me to the practice, and I fell in love with it pretty immediately. It was about a month in when I started to realize, after chanting for about a month, that I realized that this practice is all about cultivating your heart and learning how to find value in life, not just effort, and learned about people like Daisaku Ikeda, Nichiren Daishonin, who are founders of this practice, one could say, and that led me to realize that I really wanted to make it the foundation of my life. And I've been in the practice for about 3 years now, and my life has changed dramatically since then.
It's so interesting for me. I say this all the time on the show that because I grew up around Buddhism, I'm always so fascinated by people that find it sort of at different points in their life. But when you first started chanting, what kinds of things were you chanting for? And maybe you can tell me, just the experience of chanting for people listening that have never done it before. What did it feel like? Were you this is kind of weird?
So as a musician, I've always loved the sound of my own voice, which gets me in trouble. But chanting provided me this opportunity to learn how to tap into myself, to kind of open up my life, open up my awareness to something greater than myself, and to really harness my own my own abilities to change my life. So like we chant this practice, we chant this mantra, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. And so like I'd sit down in front of a wall at first and just stare at a point, and I chant for maybe 5 minutes at a time. And the first time that I did it was with my friend Loki, and I just remember finishing and thinking, why do I feel so good right now? You know, like it awakened something deep within me. It was as if the universe was kind of opening up to me. Like I felt like I was part of a greater whole than otherwise. And I also felt calmer. I felt more stable. I felt like I could think clearly. And so as I've chanted more and more, I've started to learn how to use it to combat my own, I'll say my demons, quote unquote. So I can be a very anxious person, especially when it comes to preparing for concerts. So even when I was preparing for the one I had yesterday, I was on the train and was freaking out internally, thinking, I don't feel like I know how to play this music, even though I've done it many, many times. And I just reminded myself, oh, when I'm in this situation, I can just chant and I'll feel better. And so I silently did that to myself on the train, and then I was able to come back to the grounds and was able to tap into my awareness of the studying that I've been doing. And basically it helped me play a really well-received concert yesterday. So did that answer your question?
Totally,
Okay,
totally. Well, because I think we talk about like when we chant, we're tapping into our Buddhahood or like the enlightened, our own enlightenment. It's not that like we transform and become somebody different than we are, but we're like bringing out these great qualities that are already inherent in our life. And I experience that too, like when I chant and maybe I'm like in a horrible mood and just really like in whatever that feeling is. I also experience this sense of like opening up, like oh, my view almost is expanding. Like I get out of my own head and I can see in a more like balanced way, like what's the truth of what's going on, you know?
Absolutely.
So I definitely resonate with that. After you started practicing, like were there any like big challenges you had or things that you were chanting to really see like this tangible proof that, because of Buddhism of course is like all about our internal life, and with that we also chant about like things in our external world, and those things change as well. So anyway,
the first major thing that I chanted about was to learn how to go from a me person to a we person. Growing up as an only child, my tendency was to remove myself from all situations, really. And I was able, through chanting, to slowly confront that fear of opening up to others and facing rejection potentials, amongst other things. And it helped me gain community in a time when I needed it more than ever. So right when I started chanting was also when I entered the most chaotic period of my life, where I was simultaneously teaching flute at a university. I was also a full-time student studying a practice called Alexander Technique, which is a mind-body practice, basically. And I was also touring and playing concerts all over the place. And previously, like I had like 3 friends in the area and didn't really have anyone to go to. And then I started attending these community Buddhist meetings, and I met these extraordinarily kind and warm-hearted people there whose wisdom shined in their eyes. Like you see them and realize, oh, I have a lot to learn from you. And I haven't even heard you say something, but I'm going to sit here very quietly, take it all in. And so through this community, I was able to work through my problems, working way harder than I really felt I was able to, finding peace, learning how to chant and study to help me get through those situations. But I was also able to learn how to support other people through their problems in this community, because, everything is give and take, it's very interconnected. And through that community, I was able to overcome this gigantic hurdle of not sleeping very much, seeing very few friends, having, I think, maybe 5 off days in like a 4-month period.
Oh my God.
It was insane. It was insane. So I learned how to expand my capacity and to stay true to this practice, basically, which at the end of the day is all about this idea of cultivating world peace, right? And that's not just this big, gigantic, lofty idea, something that we can do on very microscopic levels, such as respecting the dignity of life around us. And so like learning how to share that respect with people just on the street or in concerts, focusing on my grandfather's legacy or just talking about this practice and things that I loved about it with others, I would get more ability to just do what I needed to do. And I got to the finish line and I was able to be, at rest basically. So that's a long answer to a short question.
Yeah, no, I mean, it really sounds like once you started practicing, just your entire way of being seems like it shifted.
Absolutely.
Is that accurate? Yeah. I mean, I think there's, even now, like, if I study something, I can feel like, oh, wow, something really shifted in my life. The way I'm looking at this problem is so vastly different. The way I feel about it is so different. And I think something for me that's really powerful about this practice is, like, I'm somebody who, similarly, I'm like very anxious and I can be so in my head about everything, overthinking every possible thing. We can learn techniques and stuff, but through chanting is like how it can actually change my heart and the way I feel about things. It's really like astonishing. Like, I could think myself into a hole, but as soon as I chant about it, then I can actually shift it. So.
Right. It's like once our heart gets open more, it's like our brain can calm down to a certain extent.
Yes, exactly. Like my mind sort of follows that, like, oh, okay. Like, I don't need to be totally like freaking out about this.
It's like rationally we know, but actually getting into that is the difficulty of it all.
That's the hard part, right? And I feel like chanting is the thing that, like, closes that gap between, like, I know that I should feel this way, I know that this is the reality, but I can't actually feel that way about myself or about my job or whatever. But yeah, chanting is the thing that really closes the gap. So with, that kind of clear changing of just like the way that you live your life, I know then you had a major shakeup in your family. And so not everything is smooth once you start practicing Buddhism. We still have, we still have problems. So when we talked before, you mentioned like it felt like because you had been practicing and your life had been changing, you were able to tackle this problem very differently than how you might have before. So anyway, if you could just, as much as you want to share, tell me that story.
All right. So about a year and a half ago, so it was May 2024, I was in the process of starting a coaching business because I was starting to claim my financial security that I had lost after quitting my orchestra job. And I just signed my first clients, thanks to building a lot of confidence and courage. But basically right after that happened, my family went through this crazy experience. I got a phone call from a family member in the middle of the night, and I was sleeping. I was sleeping, so I didn't answer it. But then I got several more, and I realized, I think subconsciously, that I needed to wake up and check out what was going on. So I responded, and I found out that my parents had just been in a super serious car accident. They got T-boned while they were leaving a friend's home for dinner. And both of my parents were immediately taken to the hospital by ambulance. And meanwhile, I was, 1,000 miles away in St. Paul, Minnesota. So I was horrified. And, the person over the phone told me, Adam, it's time to come home. And I knew nothing to do aside from chant that moment. So I hung up. I was crying more than I probably ever had in my entire life. I went to the place where I chant, which is in front of an object that we call the Gohonzon, which is this object of devotion, essentially. So I was chanting about how I was going to support my family, how I was going to make the move to be with them, what my cat was going to do in the meantime, and just all of these things. And, I was able to get a lot of clarity in the moment that everything was going to be okay. Through this practice, I've begun to understand that we are not given challenges that we cannot handle. And through cause and effect, this was something that was building up for reasons that I may not fully understand, but it was something that needed to be handled at that time. And I was being prepared for that all along. if I hadn't had my Buddhist practice, I don't know if I would have had the willpower to begin to decide to even move home to be with them or not. So I decided I was going to, and I just waited around for like a day to get details, before I officially jumped. So basically the next day, I got this very mystic signal from the universe that things were in fact going to be okay. The Northern Lights were passing through the country, that week, and a couple of friends and I went to go look up and see them. And at one point when I went to go look at them, I noticed that the lights were in the shape of a blackbird, which is hugely significant for my family. I have a tattoo to prove it. I don't know if you want to. Yeah. And the tattoo represents the song Blackbird by the Beatles. Paul McCartney, I found out, wrote that song because he was inspired by what happened at Little Rock 9, which is one of the events that my grandfather covered. And I didn't know that when I first heard the song. I just loved it because it's beautiful. But then I learned the history maybe 3 years ago, and it shifted everything for me. The universe seemed to be saying, everything is happening for a reason. Whether it's comfortable or not, it will lead to something meaningful and valuable if you keep leaning in and have the courage to do so. So I went down to Houston. My best friend's dad was very kind and just paid for the flight because he knew how traumatic, this experience was. So, I went down and brought my cat with me. Family members helped out, got to the hospital, and basically it was, caretaking time. So my mom got out the next day, and she has multiple sclerosis, which means that she has a lot of mobility problems. And I, had to summon the willpower and strength to essentially learn how to help her with every little thing. So, moving one leg at a time, literally, I'd be on my hands and knees for the first couple of days, just helping her get to and from the bathroom or to her bed. She ended up recovering pretty well, pretty quickly, thank goodness. My dad, on the other hand, was in the hospital for a whole week, and he was fighting an infection that seemed as if he might not have lived at the end of the experience. So I was chanting furiously, for his health and for him to recover and for him to get the best medical care that he could. And mystically, his doctor ended up being one of my high school friend's dad.
Oh my God.
And he was training other doctors that week too. Wow. So he was on his A game and was really, really pouring into him. And thankfully, my dad ended up being okay, so he was able to leave the hospital. We had tons of support from friends and family, from my parents' own fortune, from all the good they had done in their own lives. And then there was what I had been slowly building up in my couple years of practice at the time. And, being with them at that point was, now a long-term occasion. I officially moved in maybe a month later, and we were in the next phase of our relationship. Originally I was their sweet child who kind of functioned like a baby roommate. In my opinion.
Baby roommate.
And I, at this point wanted to learn how to really be an integral family member and to lean into this idea in Buddhism that we have of filial piety, which is honoring and loving your parents, not specifically through obeying, but through really honoring their humanity. And it was really uncomfortable being back because, I hadn't actually learned how to have simple, easygoing conversations with them to a certain extent. We usually sat and watched TV during meals. We played games maybe when I was a little baby, but actually learning how to open our hearts and be vulnerable was a brand new experience for us. So I had to learn about emotional intelligence tremendously. My parents learned how to grasp it through osmosis to a certain extent. Because it was so difficult, I sought guidance from friends in the Buddhist community, and a great friend of mine shared a passage with me that has forever changed how I view supporting my parents. It's from the writings of Nichiren Daishonin, and the quote, I'll pull it up here so I can read it. So this is basically this idea that whenever we as children support our parents, we are actually changing our parents too. So it says, "Your hand is my hand, and your body is my body. The Lotus Sutra characters you write are the characters I write. Although you had no faith in your heart, you nevertheless wrote the titles with your hand. Therefore, I have already been saved. Think of a child who sets fire to something and, without the least intention of doing so, causes it to be burned. The same holds true with the Lotus Sutra. If one professes faith in it, one will surely become a Buddha, even though one may not expect it in the least. Right? And the Lotus Sutra is what Nichiren Buddhism is based on. It's actually the foundation of it, right? Right. So through that, I was able to understand that I wanted to figure out how to help all three of us unify and me to actually learn how to be expressive and communicative with them. So,
one question I have is, I think all of us have at least one or two family relationships in our life that are like challenging in some capacity. In Buddhism, we really believe that like our inner inner transformation can shift our environment and shift all of our relationships. So you had mentioned having to be more like motive and like really clear. I'm wondering like, what did your practice look like at the time as you were really trying to figure out how to like support your parents and transform your family, dynamics?
So I was chanting and was reading publications that talk about our practice, reading other things from the writings of Nichiren Daishonin, and things were not shifting so much. So I realized, okay, I'm going to have to step it up. So I started chanting and reading much more seriously and trying to really seek material that would help my family as much as possible. So my intention shifted in my heart. And through that, I started learning how to sit through the discomfort of change a lot more. So previously, when things would get awkward, I would just kind of run away and go play the flute. I started to learn how to kind of tease things out and ask more questions. So like there's one dinner when, I said, okay, we're going to sit down and we're going to talk and have a great time. So I started to like share everything and I saw my parents starting to fall asleep while I was having this conversation with them. And I was like, oh, this isn't what I expected at all. And I was like, okay, so maybe I need to talk about things that they are more interested in and connect with. Okay, I'll try again the next day. So went with that strategy. They were more involved, and then my mom turned on the TV like mid conversation. I was like, do you mind if we maybe talk spend time together as a family? And she was like, oh, okay. So we started actually dialoguing about our past more. I would ask questions about things that brought them value throughout their lives, and they would in turn ask me more things about like what I was up to. They started to really get curious about my Buddhist practice once they started to see how it was shaping my life. At first, my dad, hearing me chant, would make offhanded comments. He'd like smell the incense and be like, why are you stinking up the house? Or like the sound of the chant, he'd be like, it's like, do you really have to make that much noise? Like, is that necessary? But eventually they started to, I caught them like reading publications at times, and they started to encourage me to travel to do these, to go to these discussion meetings, these community events, and to participate and support, because they understood that what I was doing was also benefiting them at the end of the day. This happened, again, a year and a half ago, and now we are a lot more close knit. We have a lot more casual, joyful conversations. We've learned how to make each other laugh more. My mom especially, like, she is one of the funniest people I've ever encountered in my life. And she wouldn't always express her frustration with things. She would always be very succinct and pure, but she didn't think that expressing it would change things. So since then, she started getting a little more snarky and sassy. And, if my dad says something she won't like, she might literally like bark it back at him. And like, meanwhile, I'll be in the corner of the room being like, oop, just it's hilarious and so lovely to see that we are all learning how to unify, largely again through me building faith in this practice and understanding that when I open my heart, it helps them open up their hearts too. So it's been huge transformation.
Did you, like, when you first like got the call and were like, oh shoot, I gotta go back, even though, you felt like, okay, I'm going to do this, was there a part of you that was like anxious about like, oh my God, I don't know if I really can handle living with them? Or did you feel?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I was like, ooh, this is something that I felt I was going to have to do at some point in my life.
Yeah.
But I was terrified of it, you know? So a lot of my practice has been learning how to build courage to love even when it's hard. I was living under the premise of conditional love for a long time. And I've since, seen that whenever I express anything from my heart, it helps others do the same. So like my dad has started to have vulnerable conversations and talk about things that he's held in for a really long time. And I think like the distance with him was a lot of what made me feel like I didn't really want to go back. But yeah, things are totally different now, and we're pals. Like, we give each other hugs, like, both of my parents, like, before I go to bed every night. It's very intentional. And, since my parents are getting older, like, my mom stays sitting, but like my dad will be in his chair and I'll be like, all right, come on, you got to get up. He's like, all right. And you're like, here's like his joints like creaking a little bit as he gets up. And, we've really started to make the most of the time we have. And that has been extremely rewarding.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like this is such a powerful example of turning poison into medicine, which of course is, a very key concept for Buddhists, but turning this moment of like anxiety, I don't want to go back, I'm worried about my parents, I have to take care of them, like that moment, and turning it into the opportunity to totally change your family relationships. I find when I look back on moments like that in my life, I'm like, yeah, actually now I'm kind of glad it happened. It needed to happen so that like I could have this opportunity, because otherwise I wasn't gonna try and challenge that. I wasn't gonna try and change that. That's too hard. But sometimes you're like pushed, right? Yeah. Exactly. Sometimes you're like pushed, and because we practice, then we can really like, we have the tool to be able to really transform it. Absolutely. So one thing, when we talked before, that you mentioned was your parents being caregivers, and how when that happened, they really had to just like go all in, and which I think then kind of impacted their careers.
Absolutely.
And so I'm wondering if you can talk about that, and in relation to you now being a caregiver for your parents, but transforming that sort of, how do I say, like family karma.
Right. Yeah, it's family karma, generational karma.
Yeah.
So much. And my parents, when they're in the peak of their careers, they were living their dreams. But there was a shift in their priorities when they had to, of course, take over. So that meant that they had to leave a little bit of the things behind that fueled them for so long. And with this practice, I've been forced to realize that in order to continue the global mission of world peace, I have to learn how to support them and myself at the same time. So I've had to learn how to really be careful with my time, to master it to a certain extent, to really be disciplined in the way that I interact with other people, and to really establish a foundation that allows me to take care of all the things that are important. So I'm saying I a lot in all of this. What it's really been is we, community has transformed my concept of what we are capable of as people, that we all have unlimited potential. And through spending time with people who are transforming their lives through this practice, I'm starting to understand that it's being together and being unified in this concept of many in body, one in mind, towards world peace, that we all can increase our capacity and take on tremendous challenges, unthinkable ones. And that has allowed me to, again, find more joy in the difficulties, understanding that, okay, if I have to drive 3 or 4 hours today going back and forth between teaching and doing gigs and visiting people, that's actually me planting seeds that are going to bloom into something more stable and efficient down the road. My family karma has changed and the generational karma is shifting, all again because my concept of faith as the foundation is helping me eradicate the some of the darknesses and doubts that have clouded my perception of what I'm capable of for a really long time. So it's been this full 180.
Wow. Yeah, I'm thinking about this like idea of like really expanding our capacity and what we think is possible, and like you said, being in community with people that are like really fighting to be able to like have the most full and meaningful and deep life. It's sort of like, I find for me, like a mirror in a way. Yes. So I can see like, oh, okay, am I doing that? Or how can I apply like what they're doing? How can I, expand in my own way? So could you give me some examples of like maybe when you first moved to Texas versus now? Like, what have the things on your plate changed? Are you actually taking on more? Is it just the internal? Like, what has that progression looked like since you moved to Texas?
Now that I'm back in Texas, I've started to take on a lot more teaching. In Texas, it's not too hard to find music students because Texas is very known for having powerful school band programs and big marching bands because football.
Oh, so, okay, this makes sense. Yeah.
The big, beautiful football teams, they need big, beautiful marching bands, of course, right? So I've had the opportunity to work with several school districts and to teach students through them. I also have private students. I'm also teaching through a cool young artist program that I was introduced to by a family friend. And I've since been able to create a lot more financial stability for myself. And all of these connections have come up again, because I've been creating value through places that I grew up in specifically. So my first teaching opportunity came up through my home school district. And in the school where I had my only black music teacher, actually my only black teacher in all of my secondary education, aside from like PE. And like he was the most incredibly invigorating figure. And I have a tattoo that reminds me of him. And to kind of continue his legacy through private lessons there has been a huge benefit. Like I also am working with the Houston Youth Symphony now, which came up through being able to be a student within the program. And it was like the moment that I landed in Houston, I was getting emails and opportunities to do things, which, it was very fortunate. Yeah. So that's a lot of what I do. I'm still traveling to do gigs, but the nature of them is shifting. I've started to get to do more high caliber ones with cool musicians in LA. I've gotten to work with people like T-Pain and Will Smith's daughter, and Anderson .Paak, and some really, really inspiring musicians. Cool. And it's funny because a lot of these calls didn't start happening until right after, my parents were in the accident. Wow. So it's like, again, the moment that I shifted priorities, the opportunities I received became more grand and profound as well. So it's all connected. There's no coincidence in Buddhism. I truly believe that. And through really honoring all of these interactions that I'm in, whether it's with students or with other teachers or the audiences that I'm working with, the more that I pour myself in and respond to what they share back, the more that the universe reflects that. So again, it's this cause and effect. It's very simple in theory, but the way it comes about is unpredictable.
Yeah. Wow. And what about like you had mentioned before, like you started to become more like outspoken about issues in the classical music world, and tell me more about that. So
2023, this was just after starting to practice. Okay. I started to receive opportunities to speak up about why I left my orchestra job and amongst other things. The one in
Memphis, right?
Yes, exactly. And so the first big opportunity that came up was to speak at a conference that people attend nationally. Representatives from major orchestras and people from management organizations. And I was a part of this panel for this discussion called Demographics in Orchestra, classical music, I think. And what I brought to the table was my understanding that the classical music world has gone through a lot of institutional trauma, which is not something that people usually discuss, you know, in these settings.
Yeah.
And so I had to build up a lot of strength and courage. And the person who introduced me to the practice, when I told him I was doing this, he told me, just share your heart, Adam. Just say what you have to say. And he's a big figure in the classical music world. So it's like meeting him led to me learning how to build courage in the way that he had through this practice as well. So I got up on the stage and, you know, talked about how there are, you know, many, many different signs and laid them all out. But, you know, I said what I needed to say and things went really well. So afterwards, I talked to a ton of people who just came up and acknowledged how much courage and bravery I displayed. I was invited to be on a podcast to talk about more of that. I was invited back to the conference to speak the following year, but in my own presentation. And, you know, I poured a lot of what I learned through Buddhism into what it means to evolve within music. And I'm slowly working on my own podcast right now. Yeah, I have learned that when I speak up about something that I really care about, I feel as if I'm being protected by the universe. And the more that I do that, the more that I receive chances to share the meaning of music making, what it means to be an artist, what it means to be a Black, queer, neurodivergent person in the arts, and how honoring humanity is, to me, the ultimate purpose of art in general. So yeah, it's helped me totally shift my sense of purpose and has opened up a lot of really cool doors. And this courage is directly due to this practice.
Yeah. Once you found Buddhism, did it change any way that you felt about music, or did it feel like, this is exactly how I feel, like just a perfect match?
My grandfather, when I started advocating for his legacy and sharing what he did through musical journalism concerts, basically, like I would take writings from his newspaper and pair them with music that reflected the tales. That was my first concept of being really purposeful with music making, sharing something greater than myself, continuing a legacy. But these days with Buddhism, I'm starting to gather that music, whether it's within a single note or within like a whole concert, you can pour your entire life into it, and whether it is consciously or unconsciously received, it has a tremendous impact on how an audience receives what you're doing. And Daisaku Ikeda, a sensational Buddhist philosopher who has literally 400 honorary doctorates, I found out recently. He has this writing called Precepts for Brass Band. So that's basically the title. So it's a long document and it's extremely beautiful, but the things that have stuck out to me for a long time have been like this one line which says, recalling the history of mankind, we discovered that a race of people or nation attained happiness and peace only if there existed a sound philosophy of life. The great practice of great ideology, like the current of a great river, becomes the high ambition and rhythm of that nation. The same holds true of music. The beauty and energy of music has been the source of a nation's growth. So we can honor the ability of music to harness cultural transformation, societal transformation, and it's through our own life states that we cultivate that. And with that awareness, I've been able to be much more meaningful in my concerts. Like I used to get up on stage and like say like 2 or 3 words, like, hi, my name's Adam, I'm going to play Bach for you now, you know. And now I'm sharing the legacy of the composers and what their purpose of being is in the context of the world and what race has to do with it and all of these things. And, you know, it again taps into this idea of respecting the dignity of all life. And that has been the most meaningful way that I've been able to use my Buddhist practice through my art.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Yeah, I mean, I just had a conversation with 2 different artists, and the thing that I really took away from that conversation is like, any art or anything that we put out into the world, the essence of our life is what is communicated. You know, like it's the quality and depth of our life that totally impacts the end result. right?
Absolutely.
So I think the ability to like open that up is so crucial. So anyway, I'm like so encouraged hearing you, because I think like just sitting across from you, I can really feel like the pulse of your life, so to speak, you know? Like
the rhythm is with it. Feeling like my Herbie Hancock funkiness coming through.
Yes, exactly. So maybe I have just like one or two more questions as we wind down, but like you have so many things that you're doing right now, all while also like supporting your parents. I'm wondering like, yeah, what is your dream for yourself?
Oh,
I know it's a big question.
Wow, yeah. Let me sit with that for a second here.
Yeah.
My dream is really to learn how to use faith as the means for creating a society in which like we don't have to protest anymore. You know, like I was, and that's through art specifically. I was reading something in the writings of Nichiren Daishonin. It's this letter called On Establishing the Correct Teaching for the Peace of the Land, and it discusses so many pivotal things that reflect the life in the world we're seeing around us right now, such as that when we are experiencing tremendous turmoil that's reflected in the natural world, crazy earthquakes and tsunamis and fires in California, and all of these things happen much more frequently. And it's as if the universe is saying, pay attention, fix it right now, or something worse is going to continue happening. And when we find something that means enough to us to stand up for it and to take the lead and to share our hearts, we can shift the trajectory of a society, right? Through a single person's efforts. This is paraphrasing a quote from Daisaku Ikeda. Through a single person's human revolution, you can transform not just your life, but the trajectory of like a whole nation and the world, therefore. So if everyone had the mindset of, okay, I'm going to use my talents and gifts to make the world a better place and help all people respect the dignity of all life, then we could really do it, you know? And through that, you know, eventually it could truly come to a close. But seeking peace is that's not an impossible thing. That's a necessity. And yeah, my goal, my ultimate dream is to use music and all of my abilities to help us get there faster.
Wow. I'm speechless after that one. That was really, I'm listening to, I was thinking, wow, I need to like expand my, vision. Of course, I ask people all the time, like, what are your dreams? What are your goals? But sometimes it's hard to dream, like especially like a big dream and really believe that it can happen. But to your point, like we all have our own unique kind of qualities and gifts of who we are that can contribute to, the happiness of society and peace. So I'm going to be personally thinking about what does that look like for me and my, my vision for the future. But I always ask everyone for a piece of advice. And I think the question I want to ask you, I don't know what I had originally written, but the question I want to ask is, what advice you have for somebody that like is really struggling to get the courage and like feel the power of their life? Because I feel like so much of your experience is like through chanting really being able to like feel powerful and capable. And so for somebody that's like struggling to get there, what advice would you give them?
The most important thing with learning how to value your life and feel its power is understanding that we as individuals are representations of the universe as a whole. There's this idea of the microcosm and the macrocosm, and like every single seed that comes down from an oak tree can grow to be that same oak tree. So even when we're small, we can remind ourselves that we are part of a larger whole and can become as great as we could ever imagine. The idea that has really struck me is that like if you take a single drop of water, you see how beautiful and small it is and how pristine it is. And if you take it and put it into the ocean, the whole ocean shifts. It permeates, the single drop of water permeates the whole ocean just by joining it. And we all have that effect whether we realize it or not. So we already have this potential. We're already doing it. Again, it's just understanding and reflecting upon this concept that we are unified, especially within community. We can learn how to see our ultimate potential and support other people carry on their journeys, which is the most important part of this practice. And the more that we do that, the more comfortable we can get with that idea. Like I used to really suck at receiving compliments, but if I deny someone acknowledging something that they think is good about me, that also denies that person's observation skills. So if you can see it, you can be it.